inserting this little clip in here now. I've just editing this video and realised that it is pretty much all blurry. Luckily it's not a video that you need to see me for, so you can just listen to it. But it was far too emotional to film again. Just listen to the video, and I'm really sorry about the camera. It's old and blurry. It is what it is. So. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's been a little while since my last video. Some of you might have thought that's just because I've got a new baby, but that is not why I haven't filmed a video in over a month. As you'll be able to tell from the title of this video, you might be a bit curious. We have not had the funnest February. It was a very, very difficult month we had last month. It was the scariest and most intense month of my entire life, and here's the story behind why. I wasn't sure if I was going to share the story, but I feel like I need to share it for in case anyone has experienced this, or if they do in the future, to know they are not alone, because I've since found out that what we went through is actually really common, but I did not know that, and honestly thought that I was a terrible, terrible mother. So let's rewind back to early February. We had a 4-week-old baby who is now 9 weeks old, and luckily you'll know the ending of this story because you can see that we still have said baby. But back in February we had a really scary time. So we had all had colds kind of the end of January, early February, where we were really snotty and not very well, as in me, Joel and the boys, the older boys. I didn't really think much of it, and he also developed this cold and he was snotty and not very well. And if you don't know, which I guess you wouldn't because I don't know if I've shared this, I was quite an ill child. Most of my childhood I was very ill and had pneumonia and bronchitis and asthma, and was kind of in and out of hospital quite a lot in my childhood. So because of that, I've actually gone the opposite to a hypochondriac. I kind of don't worry when we get ill, because I always knew that I was fine, and I just seemed worse than I was, and everyone would panic, but I'd feel fine. So he gets this cold, and again, I don't think much of it. I go, he's fine, he's just got a cold, he just has to power through, kind of look after him as much as we can within that and do the normal things that we would. But it's hard because he's under 2 months, there's not much you can do or give him. So we're just trying to kind of have steam rooms, like we put hot water in the bathroom or put bowls of hot water and try and steam him and help loosen the mucus. And if you don't know, I don't know if I've shared this, honestly it's been a blur since he's been born, but he was quite ill a week after he was born. He had breathing trouble then, and we were in hospital with him, and he was on oxygen, and they think it was a virus that they thought they cleared, and what we now think is that he never really truly cleared that virus. Then he got something else on top of it, and it just made it so much worse. So what happened was he was really snotty, not very well, and it had been a few days, and I was like, oh, he just has to get past the worst of it and he'll be fine, because we had all had it and we were all recovering. It was a Sunday, during a Sunday, I was like, oh, he's been projectile vomiting a lot of his, well, pretty much all of his feeds, and it was covered in mucus. And me being apparently ridiculously naive, thought that that was a good thing. I thought he was clearing it, and I was like, oh, this is good. It's not fun for him, but he's at least clearing the mucus because there was so much of it. But that Sunday night is when everything changed, and I'm gonna try not to cry, but I probably will during this. Yeah, so it was that Sunday night. I put him to bed at about 8, and he normally wakes up for a feed back then every 3 to 4 hours, and it was then 2 in the morning, so what's that, it had been 6 hours, and I woke up and he hadn't, and I was like, oh, that's strange, he just obviously needs some rest. But I kind of picked him up and tried to wake him for a feed. I changed his nappy, which was quite empty because he hadn't been keeping much down the day before. Yeah, so I tried to wake him for a feed. I latched him on right after really trying to stir him. He was out cold. I latched him on for a little bit, but then as soon as I finished, he then projectile vomited all of that up, and I kind of monitored him then for an hour during the night, and I woke Joel up at about 4 because I was really concerned. He wasn't drinking, or if he whatever he was drinking would come back up. He was seeming kind of floppy and lifeless. It was really scary, and it was 4 o'clock. I didn't realise how scary it was at the time. It's only looking back. I just kind of thought, oh, it's a cold, he needs to sleep and rest it off. So I woke Joel up at 4 in the morning, was like, what do we do? Do we take him to A&E? And where before this we had been in and out of A&E quite a bit, and the last time we'd gone to A&E because of his breathing, it wasn't actually necessary, it was a false alarm. So I still had that in the back of my mind, because that was only, what, a week or two before this, and I had that in the back of my mind that, oh, last time we went it was a waste of time, he was fine. I kind of didn't want to waste hours and the emergency services times again. So I kind of said, what do we do? And we kind of look at him, and this is at night time, so all the light we have is, you can see just here we have a salt lamp. That's the only light we have, so it's quite red, and you can see everything, but you can't see true colours properly. And we kind of decided after watching him for another hour that we'd wait a couple more hours and just call the doctors first thing in the morning, because obviously it is a Sunday night. So first thing at 8 in the morning, we got on the phone, booked an appointment for 10 o'clock. Joel had Sol during this time, while I was desperately trying to get hold of the doctors, and we still had the lights off, or it wasn't like the daytime lights, because it's also February, it stays dark a lot later. But then when I got off the phone and I took him off Joel, I picked him up, I turned the lights on, and I saw his colouring. The only way to describe it is that he was green and pale. It was, I actually took a small video to send to my friend who's a health visitor, and I can't watch that video anymore because I think, how did I not go in sooner? And I sort of was ready to call an ambulance or walk around the corner. The doctor's is literally like a minute walk around the corner from our house. So I quickly called my friend who's a health visitor and said, look, he's lifeless, he's floppy, he's green, his breathing was really bad. What do I do? And she said, power walk to the doctors and say you need a doctor to see him now, which was what I was kind of thinking of doing anyway. So I very quickly get him in the sling, power walk to the doctors, and pretty much stomp my foot and go, I need to see someone now. There wasn't any doctors in when I got there, and I was like, oh no, like, and I said, do I need to call an ambulance? And I was very scared, and I'd kind of lost, I guess, I felt like I lost my brain in this moment, but I didn't know what to do. And luckily, after a minute of me being there going, I need to see a doctor walked in, randomly came in a bit earlier than she normally does, and said, I don't start for a little while, but I'll have a look at him. So we walked into the doctor's room. She kind of doesn't have any infant or baby monitors or anything, so she puts an adult SATS monitor on, and his SATS read to be 60, which on an adult SATS monitor is more like 70. And if you don't know, SATS should be at least 93 or more for a baby. His breathing had become less and less during this time, and she calls the paediatrics wards and say, we have a baby that needs to be seen straight away. And then they said that you need to get an ambulance, and she kind of said, well, the parents are here now, and ambulances around where we have been taking hours. This hasn't been our experience, but it has been hers. And she was like, is it best that the parents take him in? And they said no, like, wait for an ambulance, we're sending one now, it's on its way. So she puts me into a separate room with Sol, and I'm like, she comes and checks on us, but I'm just waiting for this ambulance. And during this time I'm watching him, and the only way to describe it is that he is deteriorating fast. Like, he would take a breath, and then it would probably be about 15 seconds before he would take another breath naturally, if any at all, and I would be shaking him, blowing on his face, doing anything I can to make him breathe. And then the ambulance, I finally hear them sirens after. It wasn't long, but it felt like a lifetime. And they run upstairs, and if anyone's ever got an ambulance before, at least in the UK, I don't know if it's different anywhere else, but they come in, they assess the situation, they check on the patient, they take their time. Unless it's a true emergency, they do not rush. Like, it's, whenever we've had one before, they come in, they check everything over normally, they assess the situation, and then they decide if he needs to go into hospital or not. This was completely different to anything I've experienced before. They come up into the room, then one of the paramedics sees him and says, no time, we have to go, blues and sirens, let's go. And she grabs him off of me, pretty much runs to the ambulance, strips him down naked, and it is February, it is cold, like bitterly cold. She strips him down to his nappy, puts oxygen on his face, and then she tells me to sit there. She doesn't strap him in or anything into the gurney. She literally lies him down naked, well, in a nappy, and puts oxygen on his face, and then says, like, drive, blues and sirens, we need to get there as soon as possible. Then I'm just, that whole journey, I'm just sitting there going, oh my goodness, my baby is going to die. And I have failed him. I should have come in sooner. You think all of these terrible things. And I do truly believe if I had waited until that 10 o'clock appointment that he wouldn't have made it. But you can see that we have made it. Whew. So on that drive to the hospital, which is about a 10-minute drive, it's not actually that far from our house, especially not in an ambulance, but we probably did it in 7 minutes. And she said to me while we were there en route, she sort of said, you need to be prepared for what's about to happen. She said, we're not going to the paediatrics A&E, we're going to the adults A&E. When you walk in, about 20 people, hi monkey, about 20 people will surround him at once, and they'll be asking you questions and wanting to get to him. And she was like, be prepared, it's going to be scary. So I prepared myself. Luckily this hadn't been my first experience of like A&E and things like this before, because again, like my childhood, I'm kind of used to stuff like that. And I carry him into this A&E room, and she's not kidding, I sat on the bed with him. People were putting cannulas in him, putting oxygen, different types of oxygen things on him, doing heel prick tests, asking me questions, checking his colouring. Honestly, I don't think I have seen that many, by this point, I don't think I'd seen that many people in a room before at a hospital. So they kind of stabilise him. He's on like very high oxygen, and he's on a little machine called a high flow, which if you don't know, it's little nasal prongs that go into his nose and pump hot oxygen and air into his nose to help him breathe. They did an x-ray and found that he had 2 collapsed lungs, and I've never seen an x-ray like this before. Oh, I know. Both his lungs were pretty much fully white from the mucus he had aspirated, and if you don't know what that means, it kind of means there's like fluid in the lungs. And it was scary, and I'm just sitting there sobbing because I'm like, I've failed him. It's all my fault, I should have come in sooner. And whether she said this just to make me feel better or not, I won't know, but the doctor did say no, because if you had come in sooner, we probably would have just sent you home, because he wasn't bad enough to do anything about, pretty much. So then we after quite a few hours, we get transferred onto the ward, and then the doctors kind of explain to us that there's only so much they can do in the hospital that we were at, and if he doesn't get better or doesn't improve with the things they can do, we'll have to transfer to a hospital in Leicester, which is a bit of a trek to us, because they have a CICU and can put him on a respirator, which is a machine that breathes for him. So they were like, we prefer not to do that, we want to see if we can help him here. But that next 24 hours, so at this point we're on like middle of the day Monday, so the next 36 hours was so scary, because he started off on a machine called a high flow, and then that wasn't working, it wasn't doing what it needed to. And the concept is it meant to pump air in so that it helps the 2 collapsed lungs to inflate, because he can't do it himself. And if you don't know, a baby between 0 to 3 months, his resting heart rate should be about 110 to 150. His was at 220 resting, and then went up to 250. He was working really, really hard just to breathe. So they moved on to something called, I can't remember the order of the names completely, but I think it's called a CPAP machine, where it's almost like a little mask that kind of covers their nose and does the same as the high flow, pumps hot, like warm oxygen into his lungs to help try and inflate them. It's just more powerful. And then when that didn't work, they moved on to something called a BiPAP machine. And again, this to me was the most traumatic part for him to watch for the whole thing we went through. It is a mask that pretty much covers his whole face, and it's like a contraption that's like strapped onto him, and it like pumps hot air into their face. The problem with this is he was nil by mouth during this time. They were keeping him hydrated through IV, but he was nil by mouth because having stuff in his stomach would make it harder for him to breathe, and they explained it all to me. They just said he had to be nil by mouth for this time because it's going to make it worse. So he was starving. And all the other, he doesn't take a dummy normally, but with all the other machines he could at least have a dummy to comfort him as much as possible. We were putting sugar water on the dummy, where the nurses were, to try and keep him as happy as possible during this time. So he at least had some form of comfort. But on the BiPAP machine, it covers his whole face, so he couldn't. And where it's pumping air into his face, it kind of blows up the rest of his face like a balloon, and it looked like he had been stung by 1,000 bees. His eyes, he couldn't open his eyes, they were so puffy. It was honestly torture to watch as a parent, and I'm sure torture for him to experience. So then it had been quite a few days, and it was so me and Joel, I was with him the first like 30 odd hours, and then during the day on the Tuesday we got childcare and swapped out. So I went home, had a quick nap and a shower, packed up some more things, because they had said like it's going to be a few weeks. We're going to be in the hospital for quite a few weeks, or at least a couple of weeks. So I pack up a few more bits and I go back for that Wednesday night, and during the day, the Tuesday, it seemed like he had improved, and we were, during this whole time, they were umming and ahhing whether he needed to go to Leicester or not. And from the Tuesday and how he was on that Tuesday, it seemed like he was gonna be okay and not need to go. Then Wednesday night came, and I was waking up every few hours to pump, but generally I was trying. The doctors and nurses said, look, there's nothing you can do. We are here for him. He was in the high dependency unit because they don't have a CICU in the hospital near us, but there's someone there with him the whole time. And I hadn't slept at this point because he'd been ill before this, I hadn't slept in like 4 or 5 days. I had a couple of hours nap during the day on the Tuesday, didn't sleep the Monday night, didn't sleep really the Sunday night after 2 o'clock. So I was exhausted. So they kind of said, look, go on this, like they got me a little bed and they said, try and get as much sleep as possible. We'll wake you up if anything changes. And I was waking up every couple of hours to pump milk anyway, to freeze, because I didn't want to lose my supply. So I went for a sleep and then kind of woke up, checked on him and like pumped. But then an hour after I had checked on him, I woke up with a nightmare that he had passed away and no one had told me, and that petrified me. So I ran in to check on him, and it was bad timing. At that point I heard the doctor on the phone saying, yeah, we need to get the people here to transfer him to Leicester. He's gone downhill quickly. And I found out in the like hour that I'd gone back to sleep, he was really struggling. He wasn't doing well. So they got the people that they had been discussing with us, told them to come and they need to ventilate him and take him to Leicester. So I had to then call Joel, which happened to be his 30th birthday, at 4 in the morning, and tell him that he needs to come down and that we are going to Leicester. His parents were meant to be going on a Caribbean cruise the Thursday. It was the Wednesday at the moment, and when we called them on the Monday to tell them that the situation that we were in hospital, they cancelled their Caribbean cruise, bless them. My sister was amazing, and I will be forever grateful for her that week, because she pretty much cancelled work and came and moved into our house for that week and watched the kids. And then we shipped off the 2 bigger boys up to my in-laws who cancelled the Caribbean cruise up north, and they had them for the other week. Yeah, Joel came in at by the time he got there it was 5 in the morning. The people who were transferring him got there not long after, and I honestly have never seen anything like this. In the process of him getting transferred, there was about 20 doctors, just doctors in the room. Overall, probably about 30 staff members of nurses, doctors, like different registrars, consultants, anaesthetists. There was so many people. I've never seen anything like it, and after our experience, I am so grateful to the NHS. People like to complain, but when there is a true emergency, there is honestly nothing better than the NHS. It was incredible. But so they intubate him, they put him on a ventilator to breathe for him, And this was really scary. So I went in the ambulance with him to get transferred, and finding out everything he's on. He's been given morphine for the pain. He's been given a paralytic, is that what the word is? So to paralyze him, because where he is intubated, he can't be awake in case he pulls it out in transit. And the amount of just needles in every single limb. He had 3 different cannulas in both his feet and one of his hands. He was obviously intubated and had like all of these tubes, things to sellotape his eyes closed. There was just so much attached to this tiny little human. So then we get transferred to the CICU, and honestly, we were really scared, of course, but it was actually the best thing that could have happened to us. So we've been in this very high stress situation the whole time, because we were in a hospital that wasn't prepared for dealing with such a small baby and in such a bad way. But then when we walked into the CICU, it was the weirdest thing. It was almost relaxing. We were in an environment where everyone had dealt with the worst of the worst, that there was so many people who were prepared and trained for this type of problem specifically, and there is a registrar and a consultant who just work for the CICU 24/7. So if anything happens, they have a doctor at hand. You don't have to page anyone, they are always there, and these nurses are trained for dealing with the worst of the worst. So when we go in, literally not long after we've been there, one of the nurses says, oh, these bronch babies, which is what they call the bronchiolitis babies, are our bread and butter. We get about 12 of them a week. She said, don't you worry, within 2 to 4 days he will be off the ventilator and be making a recovery. And honestly, I just sobbed, because the doctors in the hospital we were at, one of them even said to me, are you prepared for what could likely happen to him? And sort of was preparing me for him not to make it through. And I really didn't think he would, with how they were talking. I thought I had sent my baby to, I thought I had sent my baby, honestly, to it sounds terrible, but to death. I thought I had missed it. I thought I had failed him. I thought I was going to lose another baby. And I was scared that whole time. The only thing I can explain is that I was so scared the whole week we were there. And then we moved to Leicester, and I'm suddenly relaxed. I'm suddenly like, oh my goodness, my baby is going to be fine. And of course you're still worried and nervous, but I didn't have that complete fear that was just riddled in me. And then he's on a ventilator. They slowly wean him off the morphine. His puffy eyes slowly start to go down. He starts to go back, and it was really hard, because if you don't know, when you're on a ventilator, you can't make any noise, because obviously the tube goes through your voice box. So when he would cry, he wouldn't make any noise, or like if he coughed or sneezed, it was silent. And I've said to people, never let me get angry at my children crying again, because, or like get frustrated with it, because what I wouldn't have given to hear him cry during that time, it was horrible. But yeah, it was 4 days, the day 4 that they took him off the ventilator, and they transferred us to the ward just on high flow again, which is the little nasal prongs. And sorry, my phone's next to me. And then we recovered there in a normal ward out of the CICU for a few days, and then we got transferred back to our original hospital for another couple of days, and then they eventually discharged us. And they have said it's going to take, we're still not out of the woods completely, like they said it's going to take a good 6 weeks to fully recover from that moment. And he does still have a cough, he's still a bit snotty, he's not perfect. We've been home now for 2 weeks, and he's still poorly, like he's not well, but my goodness, he's so much better than what he was, obviously. All of this to kind of say that we found out that when we were in our original hospital, the children's ward, there's a whole notice board about bronchiolitis in babies and the steps and how common it is. And winter babies, it's just so common, but I've never heard of anyone having it or experiencing this before. So I just wanted to say, like, if you are going through this, I'm so sorry for one, and it is really hard. But more often than not, they get better. Like the nurse said, they very, very, very rarely have it end badly when these babies come in with bronchiolitis. It's just that they don't have the strength or power to clear their systems themselves. And they said a simple cold to us is life-threatening to babies because he was just so little. And they said winter babies obviously are the worst for it. Let me see if I can lie down. Yeah, winter babies are most at risk because they're born at a time when it's the coldest, and oh puppy, and they're not strong enough to deal with it themselves. And she sort of said to me, like many people said to me during this time, that yeah, it's just a common cold. That's what they tested. They tested for it was viral, and they tested for the specific viruses that it was, and they said it's literally just 2 common colds, but it can be lethal to babies. When we were at the CICU, there was someone who got rushed in and their baby didn't make it, and I remember hearing that mother wail in pain. And I'll forever be grateful for the fact that I actually got to come out of that hospital with my baby. Yeah, that's where I've been. So I'm not gonna be rushing making videos. I'm enjoying this time with my baby and my kids. I'm all over the place emotionally, as you might imagine, but we are on the mend. I'm starting to brave going outside again and letting other people touch my baby if they are clean and if they are not poorly. I had loads of ideas for videos that I was going to be making in February, but of course they got put on the back burner, and I will hopefully within the next few months be going back to them, but I am not rushing anything. So that's where I've been, and it was the worst. I'm running out of memory and battery, so I will wrap it up here, but that is where I've been. I'm going to be doing a video on how you can't stay frugal during certain times, and I'm just so grateful for the NHS that you didn't have to worry about having a hundreds of £1,000 bill at the end, because if we were in America right now or other places that don't have free healthcare, we would have racked up over £100,000 worth of medical bills for sure. I'm hoping to never ever 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 have to do a video like this ever again. I will not say that I hope you enjoyed this video, because there wasn't much to enjoy about it, but we're on the mend and I'm very much excited for the future and for summer to come around. There has been lots of exciting things going on in the house. We're currently in the process of building the cabin in the garden. If you're interested, I can tell you all about that and how much it costs us and how we're saving money on doing it ourselves at parts. But I will see you in my next video, hopefully a lot cheerier than this one. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye friends.